Here at the Cinema Bookshop, they've just had a really impressive collection of mostly A format paperback SF in, and I'm going to show you this bay because there's some absolutely beautiful stuff in it. Hello, welcome to Outlaw Bookseller, and yes, I'm on holiday this week. It's Monday, so this video may turn into a what I did on my holidays video. Now, you will have seen on the channel that I said I'm taking a break from YouTube, not answering comments very much, and just generally taking it easy. And I have to say, I haven't been great over the weekend. I really wasn't well at all. I had a bad night on Saturday night, and then I woke up this morning. Good grief. But yeah, you know, I'm on the meds, and it's various sort of ancillary things. It's not the central things, it's just circumstantial stuff. But I do have quite a lot planned this week, and it's supposed to be a heat wave in the UK, typical. So say this may be like a bit of a diary video that you'll get to see. So what have I got planned? It's Monday, as I say, and I've just prepared a load of books to take to Hay-On-Wye. So tomorrow I go to Hay-On-Wye. I might shoot a bit there. I may not, because I've shot there so many times, as you know, and I'm not really planning to be buying. Whenever I say that, something pops up, so we'll see. So you might see a little bit of that. Wednesday, I'm going to see Dorset Bob, and I'm going to be picking up a handful of hardcovers from him, because I have bought a lot of paperbacks in the last few years for my SF collection, and I'm trying to refocus back on the core hardcovers now, and there's not really a huge amount I want, and I do actually want to get rid of some stuff and move back into a bit of sort of quiet, you know, on the side dealing and what have you, just selling stuff on, because I just haven't got the room. It just really is that simple. But I thought we'd have a bit of a mini book haul just to show you what I've been buying. Now, a while ago, you'll remember that I got a gift voucher from my company for 15 years service, which was quite nice. And I had a little bit left on that, so I finished spending that last week. And just some things I bought, I'll show you now. I haven't been reading much SF, I've been reading other things, though I am starting to think I might be in a mood to read some SF again, because I was watching Richard's channel, Richard Rempel, and he's just started his reading of the second tranche of Ace specials, and I did a video about those about 9 months ago, and I've read some of them, and there's one or two I haven't read, so you never know. I should say, if there's a whirring sound in the background, it's because I've got a fan on, because it's quite warm in here. So what am I reading at the moment? At present, I am reading From the City, From the Plough by Alexander Barron, and this is in the Imperial War Museum Wartime Classics series. And Alexander Barron, this is his first novel. He wrote about 10 novels, did lots of screenwriting. He was a London-based writer, wrote a book called Low Life, which is really good, which is about dog tracks, betting on greyhounds, that sort of thing. If you want to read a greyhound racing-based SF novel, you could read The Race by Nina Allen. There's other stuff in it as well. And this was the first of a trilogy he wrote, and this came out about 2 years after the war, and he experienced the D-Day landings. And of course, they've been in the news a lot recently because the anniversary of D-Day came up, the Allied invasion of Normandy, which then pushed forward to Berlin with the Red Army on the other side, and put an end to Mr. Hitler and his evil plans. And this is really good. It's really cinematic. The writing's very straightforward, it's very sympathetic, and you see this whole tranche of different characters, some of which you come from the city, some from the country, hence the title From the City, From the Plough. And this is an interesting series. There's about 20 of them. They haven't had a huge amount of coverage in bookshops, and they've really filled a gap, because there was a time in bookselling for decades where myself and colleagues would be approached by customers saying, you know, do you have any great novels about, you know, the British effort in World War II? And we could never think of anything apart from The Cruel Sea. And they were all, the things which had been read were all long out of print, and this is one of them. So this is one of 20 novels which are British, and they all reflect the experience of British people on the front line, in tank battles, on the home front, all sorts of things. And I must say, this is really excellent. It's got a really cinematic style. And I would say this really should be made into a film, and it does cover that historic moment. I'm thoroughly enjoying it, because I was thinking about war novels the other day, and I haven't read that many, but the ones I've read, I seem to have chosen very good ones to read. and at some point I'll do something about war novels, or I'll do a series of things about different war novels I like. There's a couple I've meant to cover on the channel since the channel started nearly 3 years ago, so I may do those soon, because the ones I've read are fantastic. So I do recommend this, really good, and have a look. The best way to find these is actually on Amazon. You go on the Imperial War Museum site, they're actually quite hard to find. There's about 20 of them, as I say, great stuff. And a lot of them have been out of print for like 40 years or more, longer. A lot of them I'd never ever seen. Just great. More on the SF front, something which a lot of us were waiting for this to appear, was this from Subterranean Press, Logical Fantasy by John Wyndham, a nice hardcover collection of his short stories right the way through his career, through a good 30-year time span. And I got mine from Amazon USA, and this is a limited edition, numbered 1,000 copies. Let's have a look. And Logical Fantasy was what John Wyndham called SF. There you go. There's the numbering. He didn't really like the term science fiction. I think Logical Fantasy, well, I can see what he's saying with it. I think it's quite clumsy. I don't like it, but it makes a good title for an anthology. And really, really nice. And the stories in this are pretty much all very familiar to me. I read and reread these when I was a kid. And there's things that some of the titles get changed. There's a story in here called Spheres of Hell, which was published in the 30s. And I think that's the Puffball Menace. And the Puffball Menace is sort of like a precursor of Day of the Triffids in a way. And, you know, so that's the 30s. And there's things like The Man from Beyond, Child of Power, which is sort of Sturgeon type thing. And, you know, Wyndham was tackling a lot of the Golden Age things early in the Golden Age and before, because he started writing for American magazines before. And there's post-apocalyptic stories like The Wheel, which is an early 50s thing tied in with that period. Chinese Puzzle, which is about a dragon and is set in Wales, which is really funny. And there's some great time travel stories in this. So it's just really nice for me, a really old Wyndham fan, to have these in a hardcover format. Very, very nice. Because some of the collections published by Coronet in paperback in the 70s and early 80s, which I bought when I was young, were issued by Seven House, and they're like hen's teeth. And the only one I've got is Stowaway to Mars, which I think was the last one they did. The others are really hard to find, same as Wyndham's stuff in Michael Joseph is. I then decided to spend my remaining cash on some classics, and you'll see here, this is this rather pastoral looking book is John Collis's The Worm Forgives the Plough, which used to be a penguin. It's now in vintage, and I really like that cover with teasels, I think you call them, on there. And it's a bit of rural writing, as we used to see. Rural writing, nature writing. And nature writing's been a big thing in Britain the last 15 years. There's really too much of it published. But I love that title, The Worm Forgives the Plough. And it has a resonance to me, because I used to sell that book a lot of years ago. So I decided to pick that up because I really like that cover. So that's why that's there in pride of place. But yeah, I decided to get some modern classics, I should say. And there is some SF amongst the books I'm going to show you. And the ones I'm going to show you are from the Vintage Classics Quarterbound series, Quarter Cloth. And the main problem with these books is that they're very hard to find in good nick because they're not shrink wrapped. And it took me 2 or 3 tries to get them and get them in good condition. I'm going to go through them A to Z by author. This is an Italian novel, The Leopard by Giuseppe de Lampedusa, which is an Italian historical novel. It's very good. I've read it before. There's a really good film with Burt Lancaster. And as you see, it's bound in dark green quarter cloth there with the embossed letters and then images on the boards. And that leopard there, which is the emblem of the family that this novel is about, and it's very, very good, was adopted by Collins Harville as their sigil, and you would often see a cartoon version of this prancing leopard on the spine of the books. And Collins were very big on that, because something that Collins published was Born Free, the book about lions, and I'm sure that the Adamsons did one about leopards as well. I can't recall now. So the leopard was one of their big things, and this is a cracking book. So then we move on to a bit of SF, and I decided it was time for an upgrade to Brave New World. I do have a really nice penguin, not a penguin, I've got a nice American HarperCollins paperback, which I'm moving on. I'm selling it in Hay-On-Wye tomorrow, and it's like new. And I do have a Penguin Modern Classic as well. So here's the vintage one with the yellow quarter cloth and a really, really nice modernist design there on the laminated boards. really, really good. So I thought it was time I upgraded to a nice decent hardcover of that. I mean, some of these things get issued in Folio Society, but I don't always like Folio Society's designs and livery, and I think they're overpriced, basically. I really think Folio are overpriced. I've got the odd one. I think I've got about 10, and I do watch out for the sales, which happen around about June and just after Christmas, so do watch out for the sales. Then an old favourite of mine, and the first Yukio Mishima I ever read, wonderful book about cruelty, delicacy, and the sort of conflict in post-war Japan between tradition and the new way of doing things, and that's The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea, with a sort of cod hokusai design there. And this one's really hard to find with unmarked boards, and as you see, that's beautiful blue cloth there. This is a great book. This is a great starting point if you've never read Mishima. It has great brevity, it's very well written, it really will make you flinch because there's some incredible cruelty in the story, but it's absolutely brilliant novel, and this sort of changed my life. This was one of my early sort of modern classics I read, and I think it's a fantastic book on every level. And if I were just to pick one Mishima, that would sort of maybe in the running alongside Confessions of a Mask, probably. Then speaking of war books, here's something I haven't read for a very, very long time, and you're talking at least 40 years. There was a new film version a couple of years ago. There's another film version, and it's a famous World War I novel, All Quiet on the Western Front, by Eric Maria Remarque. And of course there was a sequel to this as well, the title of which escapes me, which I've never read, and it's in burgundy cloth and decorated boards. You can see the soldiers there, really, really nice. And these are nice little demi books. I like these a lot, but I do wish they'd shrink wrap them or put a glassine wrap over them. That would be really classy. And the final one I bought from the most recent tranche, these were published in April, all of these I think, was this one, another war book, but also an SF novel that you'll know and love, Slaughterhouse-Five. There we go. And I do have a Cape Slaughterhouse-Five. I did have the 50th anniversary edition. I've moved that on, which I wasn't that fond of it. And it's got really nice pink cloth there, and you know, the Tralfamadorian eye there in the bomb. And yeah, and obviously based on Vonnegut's own experiences during the firebombing of Dresden in World War II. So that counts as a war novel as well. So looking at them together, I think you'll find they're very handsome. They also did a nice edition of Talented Mr. Ripley, which I didn't buy because I've got a really nice Virago one. But I think you'll agree, they're very nice, aren't they? So absolutely beautiful. Is there anything else today? I think that's it for now. So maybe the next segment will be on Hay-On-Wye tomorrow. It's Tuesday and we're headed for Hay-On-Wye, and we're about 30 miles from Hay now on the Brecon Beacons. We've stopped so the video editor can get a snack from the snack van and have a bit of a rest because she had a rough night last night, and I didn't sleep that well myself actually, but apparently I was snoring like mad, so there you go. So we're going to sell a load of books at Cinema Bookshop today and just have a tootle around. I'm not planning to buy anything, but we'll see, I guess. But it's really nice to get out into Wales and to stop here. We sometimes take a different route. I prefer this route because it goes through countryside that I know really well, having grown up around here. And It's just a quicker route. It's a nicer route along the M4 than the A470, which is the longest road in Wales. It's the best way to go, really. So that's where we're headed, toward Brecon and Hay-On-Wye. Here at the cinema bookshop, they've just had a really impressive collection of mostly A format paperback SF in, and I'm going to show you this bay because there's some absolutely beautiful stuff in it. Lots of unbroken spines. For example, if you look at this Dying Earth set there, you hardly ever see them with unfaded spines and unbroken spines. Really, really nice. So if you're going to visit Hay soon, this will be something to look at, and this is in the new acquisition section, not the regular SF section. Really fantastic stuff. Lots of books in beautiful condition. But I must be good because tomorrow I'm off to Dorset Bob's. But I suspect there might be one or two things here that I want to pick up. Really great. Should have brought my upgrades list, really. I'm gonna have to have that. Well, I wasn't expecting that. Rows and rows of beautiful A formats, mostly hard SF, late 70s, early 80s, right up until early 90s, nearly all A format. I did make some purchases, you'll see them. Some of them are things which I'll sell on, some are upgrades. Spent more money than I intended to. I'm going to have a second look later on. This is supposed to be a selling trip as well. Never mind. One of the questions which has interested me recently is the question about how influential this channel is. Well, obviously we've got 8,000 subscribers and there are, let's see, usually 1,000 to 3,000 people who watch pretty much everything. It does vary, so it's not a huge channel and it's only 3 years in. But what you'll notice is that where I am influential over other booktubers is in terms of the use of proper terminology in SF. Yes, most people are still saying sci-fi, which gives me great pain. Richard Rempel at Vintage SF says SF. I think some of the others are using the correct term more, but you'll notice people are using the terms text block, livery, singleton is occasionally coming up rather than standalone, and you know, the pan lozenge was something I coined long before I went on YouTube. The panther oblate hasn't really caught on, but yeah, I think you'll see that in much bigger channels the proper terminology, especially the book terminology, A and B format, those things are starting to catch on, which I'm very pleased by, because I think it's important really that everybody's on the same page, and if we use the same terms it's easier to communicate about SF. And as ever, Hay-On-Wye is not open. Is this shop ever open? If you've watched the channel before and watched my coverage of Hay-On-Wye, you'll find that this shop is always closed. How is it going to last? So back from Hay-On-Wye, time for the book haul. And as you saw, there was a nice little collection gone into the cinema bookshop there. And I wasn't going to buy anything. And that's always the thing with Hay. I keep saying I've burned it down. But recently, when I've gone there, I found things I wanted. But I did a lot of upgrading, which is really interesting because it's a mood thing, but it's also what's there. You know, it's that thing. It's serendipity, which you don't get so much online, but you do get in a bookshop. So we start with a couple of children's books here on the right, and they were from let's see, Richard Booth's bookshop. There's a lot of new books now. Their science fiction is dwindling to nothing. Used to be great, now it's absolutely dreadful. But we picked up a couple of things there. The video would have got one as well, which I'll show you in another video because I don't have it here. But we've got Frontier Wolf by Rosemary Sutcliffe, which is one of her Roman historical novels about the Roman conquest of Britain. And I'm a really big fan of her Arthurian books. And of course, her most famous book is Eagle of the Ninth, which I've never got around to reading, but it's a nice old puffin, so I'll get that. Very nice, it's just a couple of quid. And next to that, Viking's Dawn by Henry Treece, which is a slightly older puffin. It's got some marks at the top there. I've not got to work on that, and I don't think they'll come off. And the spine's a bit faded, but really, really nice. And Henry Treece, of course, I mean, his stuff's all out of print. Look at that lovely illustration. His stuff's all out of print now. There may be print on demand editions. I don't think there are. But he was a teacher and a classical scholar. And he wrote lots of sort of matter of Britain stuff, Arthurian, Celtic, Viking stuff, all sorts of things. And interestingly enough, he was the mentor of Ted Lewis, the great British crime writer. And Ted Lewis was taught at school by Henry Treece, and they became friends as Lewis matured. Now, Ted Lewis, of course, wrote Jack's Return Home, which became the film Get Carter, and he went on to become the premier hard-boiled crime writer in the UK, the king of Brit Grit, and he died about the age of 42, and his work's amazing. So Henry Treece helped foster that talent, and they wrote about quite different things, but it just shows you how writers work together and how helpful that would have been. But I was really pleased with that. I think that's really nice, because his books are really uncommon, and you know, you have to pick them when you see them, and usually they're in a state, so I'm pleased to get that. And I am buying a few more vintage puffins these days. There were quite a few places that have their own little puffin sections now, but mostly a lot of them are in a state. I only buy really nice ones. I'm not massive on getting a huge children's collection. I just like to stick with the sort of fantasy and SF and historical things that I like, so I was pleased with those. And then on the left, you will see a copy of M. John Harrison's The Centauri Device. Now, I bought that because it's an uncommon book, and I thought I had that edition because that's the Panther. And I found to my surprise that I didn't have it. I must have had it at some point, because I've got several copies. Maybe I sold my old one on. It's got a bit of sticker residue there. It had a Costco sticker on, and that's from the collection that I showed you briefly in Cinema Bookshop. And it does have a little bit of a ripple on the spine. But you know, this is very uncommon, and even though it's in print in Masterworks, I couldn't just leave it there. And yeah, this is a paperback first. You don't see these very often, so if you see it, pick it up. The really rare one, of course, is the Machine and Shaft 10, which I've had since the 80s, and those are the early stories, a lot of which now he effectively suppresses. So worth watching out for early Panther M. Johns. And The Committed Men is also very hard to get as well. And, you know, they're just great books. I mean, they're his early books, as I say, he's not keen on. But they're really interesting to read them before you read his more advanced work and his best work from the 1980s. So as I say, this collection that popped up, I ended up buying lots of stuff which are upgrades, and maybe the things I'll sell on. And we'll go left to right this time, which is the proper way, of course. And you'll see there's a lovely spiffing Arrow copy of The Crucible of Time. And I have got a copy in really, really good nick, which I bought probably about a year ago. I looked for a decent copy of that literally for decades, because it came out round about the time I started in the book trade, and a rep gave me a load of flat jackets, because what they would have a folder for each month with the titles coming out, and the jacket would be in there, tucked in behind the plastic, and it would be flat. And I had a load of them, and I never actually had this book, and I got rid of them, and they're really hard to find now. They're sort of rep samples, and I couldn't get a decent copy of this book for years, and I managed to find one about a year ago. This one is as good, if not better, so one of them will be sold on. Really, really nice. Though I have to admit, when I've tried to read Brunner recently, and I used to be quite a fan, I've really struggled with this stuff. I'm not enjoying it. I've reread a couple in recent years, and I need to go back to some of the major ones, but I did struggle with them, I have to say. And in the middle there obviously is a Clockwork Orange, and even though I've got a few copies of Clockwork Orange, that's an interesting one, because this is a Penguin first. I don't know whether it's a Penguin first or a first thus, because, and it's in great nick, as you see, this was £2.95. And the interesting thing about this one is it says, now a terrifying film. And if I look at the printing history inside, sorry it's off camera, bear with me. Yeah, this says 1972 and it's the first printing. So that looks like the very first Penguin. I'd have to talk to Jules about that, he would know. But the real point about that is that that edition, which came out to time of the film, as it says, now a terrifying film, is the American edition, which only has 20 chapters. And what's fascinating about this, when I say edition strictly speaking refers to text. Now in America, Clockwork was published with 20 chapters, not 21, which is why anybody who knows the full novel, which is 21 chapters, and that's symbolic, because 21 used to be the coming of age. It's 18 these days, of course. It's when Alex sort of recants really and all the naughty things he's done. It's also got the Nadsat glossary in it. Now the UK text, 21 chapters, symbolic, important in terms of plot, and doesn't have the Nadsat dictionary. So I had a copy of this with the Nadsat glossary in the back, but I'm going to move that on. So that'll probably go in a sale video. I might do a sale video soon, actually. The other thing is that, and you'll hear me talking about this probably when I go to see Bob later this week, it's very much that there's supposed to be a book fair coming up in Westbury in September that Morris of Zardos, All You Need Is Books, is organising. And me and Jules are thinking of having a table there to clear some stuff out. So hopefully that'll happen and we'll see you there. But I may do a sales video in the meantime because my space issues really continue. You know, as I say, I sold 6 boxes of books, but you know, I've bought some stuff now, so what can you do? But yeah, so that's interesting. So that's an upgrade. My other copy with the glossary is not so nice. It's a late printing, that gets moved on. Then we have Samuel R. Delany's Triton from the mid-70s. That's a corgi, as you can see. And I absolutely love that edition. I've got several editions of Triton. It's my favourite Delany book, also known as Trouble on Triton these days. There's a lot in it about sexual politics, and I really like it. I say it's my favourite one. I absolutely loved it as a book. I've read it and read it and read it. It really sort of does something with my head. And, you know, it's years and years ahead of all the identity politics nonsense of today. It really is ahead of its time. And I've got that because I had a really nice copy and I dropped it and it ended up with a big gouge right at the head of the spine, and this one's pretty good. And I also had another copy at one point which I gave to my friend Dan, who wrote a great book about Lacanian psychoanalysis and Kubrick's 2001, which I showed in the early days of the channel. And I've given it to him and I said, read this, you know, you'll love it. He's a psychologist and philosopher, and he doesn't normally read SF, but I said, look, Delany will really float your boat. So I've got that, so I can now pass on the one with the damaged top. So please, because that is a favourite. And that's the thing about bagging. If you bag your books and you drop them, they're more likely to stay pristine. So I'm behind on my bagging, so a lot of these will get bagged later on. So we move on, and as you see there, we've got a really, really nice coronet edition of The Overman Culture by Edmund Cooper with a Chris Foss cover. I absolutely love that cover, and I bought it because some of my Coopers are, you know, they're not bad, they're not sort of top grade, and I saw that one, I particularly liked that one. I couldn't remember what state my existing copy was in, and I'll just show you my existing copy so you can see the two side by side. So as you see, they're from different printings. This is an earlier printing. The green is sort of darker. The printing of the artwork isn't quite so fine. It does have a bit of fading down there, and the coronet sigil is in black rather than red. So this is a 70s one. Let's have a look at the dates. I'm going to make a guess. I would say this is probably mid-70s. Let's have a look. Yeah, 74. So this is a first printing, and this I would say is an early 80s one. Let's have a look. So let's see. That's 79 third impression. So you see the subtle changes in livery and the print quality. There you go. So it's quite interesting. So even though that's a dupe, I don't know, I might hang on to it because it's very pretty. The art is rendered far more clearly, I think. I think the printing's better. But I like the austere black on that one. But looking at the faded spine, I'm beginning to think that that one, yeah, I think that one will get passed on. So I'll put that in the sell pile. But great cover art, I think you'd agree on there. Really, really nice. And as you see, we're going alphabetical order as well, left to right. That's the way to do it. And in the middle there, an Avon US edition of Infinite Dreams by Joe Haldeman, which is his first short story collection. And it's got a nice red toned text block there. I do like Avon. You don't see this stuff very much. And as you see, these are beautiful. And most of these books were about £3, £3.50. And the person who'd sold the collection on, it's hard to tell whether they'd read them or not. They look unread, but any book above a certain thickness would have a spine ripple. So I left all of those, even though there's one or two nice-ish ones. So I don't know whether they had that thing where they'd half conquered how you read without leaving a mark, but struggle with the bigger books, because that is harder. And as I say, I wasn't going to buy anything, but when I talked to the person, my contacts there, about selling them, they said, oh, we're not going to be in today. If you talk to one of the other guys, by the way, we've got an SF collection just in. And he said, I've only priced some of it, so I didn't see the rest. So if you're going to Hay soon, you probably pick up some more nice stuff. It was fairly traditional SF towards the hard end. There wasn't so much in the sort of new wave era, but you'll see more of the things coming up as we go. But yeah, I'm sure, looking at this is quite thin. I think the UK edition, the Orbit one from the 80s, which I remember selling, I'm sure it's a much bigger book than that. So at some point I'll do a comparison, but I don't have a copy of that. Haldeman, you know, was pretty big. I mean, Forever War obviously is the signature book, but I used to sell a lot of his other stuff as well, so that's going to be interesting. I have read the odd short story, but the idea of sitting down and reading his debut collection is quite attractive, because I'm sure it'll be varied and interesting, and he's always really hot on the science, and, you know, he's got a great heart, and it really comes through in the characters, I think, in his books. Then a really lovely Panther of War with the Robots by Harry Harrison, and I really love this cover. This cover art is absolutely beautiful, and I bought this a while ago. Within the last year I bought a copy which was really, really nice, but the text block was absolutely disgusting. So this has got a really nice clean text block, so I'm sticking with that. And I must admit, I've never been that fussed on Harrison. I really, really like Make Room, aka Silent Green. I read some of the stainless steel rat books when I was in my teens, and I was always disappointed with them because I loved the titles. I mean, Stainless Steel Rat Saves the World, or whatever it is, or Saves the Universe. It's a great title, but I never found them to be as amusing as they set out to be. And I'd also read Bob Shaw's Who Goes Here by that point, which I think is far superior. So, you know, but I will admit there's probably a lot more Harrison I could try, and I've got some I haven't read yet. But, you know, he was a great guy, of course, fantastic editor. But yeah, beautiful artwork. I think you'd agree on that one. So far, of all of those books, apart from the two children's books at the beginning and the Haldeman collection, they're all books I already had. So they're all sort of upgrades or dupes. The upgrades is what they'll be, because the dupes will be sold on, as I say. And here's a bit of Heinlein, and I just thought this was absolutely beautiful. Tunnel in the Sky, and lovely. It's not a lozenge, as you can see, but it's really nice. And there were also some Arthur C. Clarke's from this sort of period there as well. But my Clarke collection, I don't really want any more, I don't think. Look at that, isn't that lovely? And in that lovely, let's see. And this is from, gosh, I can't believe that. I cannot believe. Well, it's hard to tell, because this edition is from 68, but that's about a 6th printing, so I think that's a good bit later. I actually think that's a 70s edition. That's not a 60s book. Absolutely lovely. It probably had several different covers before that. It would have probably had a plain blackish cover, I'd have thought. But that was such an attractive book, I couldn't leave it there. And I'm not a massive Heinlein fan, as you know. And interestingly, it doesn't say Robert A. Heinlein on that one. It doesn't, some and not others. Now, next to that, again, that's a book which I already have. I don't have a copy of Tunnel in the Sky, interestingly enough. I do already have a copy of Farnham's Freehold. Mine is a Bayon one, which I bought new probably about 20 years ago from Borders in Bristol, when that was still there. And this is a Corgi, and this is from the, I think, early 80s, and that's a Jim Burns jacket, which is really, really nice, and you don't see that very much. And I mean, one of the great tragedies of a lot of Jim's work is that it looks fantastic on A format paperbacks, but a lot of it was never used on hardcovers, and because he does this wraparound thing, and very beautiful, as you can see. So let's have a look at the date on that, because I don't remember selling this edition. Let's have a look. This is the 79, so that's the 79 reissue, and this was definitely out of print in this edition by the time I started bookselling 5 years after that. But really, really nice. And of course, that's quite a controversial, that one. You know, there's a lot of controversial Heinleins, And, you know, he's not somebody who really grabs me. There's a few things I like. I wasn't massively fussed on that one. But as I say, that one, I don't know. I know it because obviously I used to sell it. I know all the Heinleins in terms of the titles and what have you in the rough chronology, but it's not one I've read. So that'll be interesting. And I was really pleased with that. So that's actually a new title for the library, interestingly enough. Then I came across these, which were sold as one lot at Hay-On-Wye Book Centre for, it was just under 20 quid. And these used to be really, really, really popular in the mid to late 80s. I think the first one, The Summer Tree, came out in 85. It's by Gavriel Kay, and they're published by Unwin. Really beautiful. And these were Unwin's most successful fantasies. Unwin published a lot of fantasy in the late 80s under the aegis of Jane Johnson, who was their editor then and looked after the list. She looked after the Tolkien stuff as well, my friend Jane, and she did, you know, a great job. And she did books with really interesting covers. She tried to break the mold a bit, and she was somebody who really pushed the envelope on that. She really wanted things to look different and be original. And of course the trouble is that doesn't always work well with fantasy readers. They want things to look the same. But these were massively popular, and he's still active now. The Fiona of Our Tapestry was his big best-selling series. And before that, in the 70s, he'd worked on the final text of the Silmarillion. He was a Tolkien scholar, so naturally, you know, he would turn to doing a fantasy himself. And I have read him. Very elegant and sophisticated. Cut above the average thing even then, but I've been after decent copies of these with unbroken spines for ages and ages and ages, and you just do not see them. And I used to sell them like mad back in the day. They're still in print, you know, but aren't they absolutely beautiful? Really ornate and very carefully done, and they've got that sort of almost William Morris Arthurian arts and crafts feel. They remind me of the artworks of William Burgess, who decorated Castell Coch, the Red Castle, which is just down the road from me in Wales, which was a Victorian folly on the site of an old castle which had collapsed. But yeah, really, really nice. So I was very pleased with those. Delighted. The sort of thing that you don't expect to come across, and I wasn't actively looking, it was just if they were out there. So I'm just really pleased to get those. So that was a fantastic score. So they are new to the library, and they go into my 80s fantasy nostalgia library, where I have the very best-selling things like Raymond Feist, David Eddings, those sort of things, which I used to sell a lot of, not particularly books I like, but they mean a lot to me because they were a big part of my book selling life, and I was selling them all the time. People were very keen to buy them. They were saying, when's the next volume coming out? And this was part of that. So that almost, I think, pretty much completes my small but perfectly formed collection of the key commercially successful fantasies published in the UK between 77 and about 86, which is really great. Then we have a little bit of Ursula Le Guin in Panther, and these Panther A format ones are really uncommon these days. I mean, you can pick them up, but again, these have unbroken spines, are in really good condition. There is some sticker residue there on Left Hand of Darkness, and it's not 100%, but it will do. The text block's quite fox there, but that is really nice. You don't see it very often. Some of these go for really big money on eBay. I've seen that copy of Left Hand of Darkness go for between 15 and 35 quid quite a few times, which is bizarre, really. But at the same time, it is a testament to how uncommon it is in that livery and stuff, and really, really nice. And of course, I've got, let me see, how many copies have I got? I've got a Masterworks hardcover of Left Hand of Darkness. I've got the Orbit paperback, which is the same livery, nice and blue, my favourite. Would one like a first edition? Well, of course one would. Now, because the true first is the Ace Special, the first printing of the Ace Special, but a first hardcover would be nice. But you are talking telephone numbers, so we forget that. But it's a fantastic book. It really, really is, has to be said. And The Lathe of Heaven, which was her attempt to do a Philip K. Dick. And it's an interesting one, The Lathe of Heaven, because I like it, it's good, but it's about a guy whose dreams can change reality, and he ends up talking to a analyst who tries to program the guy's dreams to sort of alter reality for the better. So the guy goes to sleep, he dreams of a certain utopian scenario or a change to the world, and he wakes up the next morning, that change has come about. Unfortunately, the implications of that change haven't been thought through, and things get worse and worse and worse. And it was her attempt to do a PKD, as they're saying, that it was about that whole thing about melding reality and what is real. But Dick, of course, would do it in an off-the-cuff way, and things would just happen. And Le Guin is more rational and structured than that. Dick isn't like that. He's more in touch with the chaos of the universe. So it does come off as quite stiff in a way. But it's a great experiment and a marvellous little book. I love it. But yeah, this is a really nice panther. I hadn't seen one of these for years and years and years. Fantastic condition. Little bit of a mark on the text block, but we can cope with that. Beautiful. So again, more books that I already have, but I've been watching out for decent puff-in copies of the initial Earthsea trilogy for quite some time. And what you see here are volumes 2 and 3, of course, The Tombs of Achuan and The Farthest Shore. And I mean, I absolutely love these books. And a while ago, I bought the Gollancz hardcovers, which are boards, plain boards with some gilting on them. And I have been thinking of getting the whole set, but I didn't have Tehanu, and I had Tehanu in an omnibus, a Penguin omnibus, so I got rid of. And then I realised I didn't have a copy, and I have been thinking about getting the Gollancz laminated boards. It's not laminated, they're just boards. And also the same one of The Other Wind, and the one of The Other Wind is really nice. It's this really yellow board, which is really beautiful. But I've got a jacketed first of that, so it's one of those things. So Tehanu, I don't have at all at the moment, so I picked this one up because it was there. And that's a Bantam Spectra, really, really nice. So the livery different to the others, but that goes, because Tehanu kind of stands alone to me. It obviously is the same sort of characters and scenarios that you see in the initial trilogy, but later on when Sparrowhawk is an old guy and what have you. Not quite the same. And there is that sexual politics thing in there and feminism thing in there. And I did enjoy it, but it's a different sort of character of book to the other ones. And I do think the early ones are better, even though they're children's books. So now what I'm going to try and find is a copy of The Wizard of Earthsea in the same livery and the same condition, because you know you can find them. Isn't that a lovely illustration? You can find them, but you can't find them in good nick. And these were $4.95 a pop, which I thought was good because the condition is very, very good indeed there. And there you go. We've got a map, as you'd expect, and yeah, really, really lovely stuff. So I've just got to watch out now for the first one. And again, I haven't been actively looking. It's just if they pop up, and lo, they pop up. Serendipity rules again. There was loads of Jack Vance from this collection on sale at Cinema Bookshop, and I've got a lot of Vance. I'm not really buying much now. I'm not a completist. I've got a fair whack, and some of these you will have seen my collection in hardcover, but I looked at these and they were so nice. I mean, I do have Showboat World with this Jim Burns jacket in coronet, an earlier printing, and probably in not such good nick. So this one was nicer condition, so I bagged that because I thought, well, even if my existing one is better than I think, this is a nice one to have. And it had this cover for years and years and years, and unfaded spine, and absolutely lovely. There's a bit of minimal sort of wear increasing there, you only see in certain lights, but very, very nice. Great stuff. And I've got a door of that one as well, I'm sure. So yeah, at some point, something I want to get back to. You know, every now and again I do an overview of people's career. I'm going to do some more collection overviews where I show you a complete collection of a particular author's work, hardcover and paperback. I usually do those in 2 parts. I need to do an Ellison one of hardcover soon because I've got loads, because I get lots of comments about the Dangerous Visions, not Dangerous Visions, about the Greatest Hits review video, which has been really popular. Thanks to everybody who's commented. And I get a lot of comments telling me stuff I already know. And of course, the thing is, very often people are making comments to say it to the rest of the community, but not everybody reads all the comments. I do, of course, I read them all. So I often think people is coming to me and say, yeah, I know all this, you know, it's sort of, you know, I've done this a long time, you know, so that can be irksome, but it's just people mean well, so that's all it is really. But yeah, so Vance there, the 5 gold bands, I don't think I've got that, and it was, I'm pretty sure I haven't, and it's Mayflower one, Granada, little bit of a nick there. Again, normally a book you don't see in great nick, and it was sort of missing from the collection. There you are, the word nick, two meanings, the correct meaning as in a small cut, and nick as in condition, which is an old bit of British slang. So yeah, and that one, did this have another title? I think it did have another title at some point. Let me just have a look at it. It's not going to tell me or anything. I'm sure it'll be screaming at the screen and I should probably look it up, but I can't be bothered. So there you go. But very, very nice indeed. And then I just had to buy this. I had to buy this book because it's so beautiful. Truly on Alaska 2262, of course, is the first volume of a trilogy. And I have the trilogy in an omnibus hardcover, which is really nice. And, you know, Dore did these. This is a late one. This is Grafton, and this would be about 86, 87, I would say. Look at that spine. Look at that. Absolutely gorgeous. Totally unfaded. I couldn't leave that there. And I thought, no, is this the first in the trilogy? And I thought, I think it is. So let me just have a look at the date. So let's see. Yeah, this is 87. So it's the 87 livery. And I remember stocking this. And I really like this block here. And the typography is nice, and if you look there, there's the Starship Enterprise, or something like it without the disc on the front. So absolutely stunning. So I couldn't leave that there. Gorgeous, lovely. And of course with Vance, you know, he's at the dreaming pole, isn't he? You know, it's all very lush and verdant and not always strong on plot. Character varies. Sometimes he's spot on. Plot tends to meander a bit, but you know, they're sort of wonderful dreamy things, very Oniric. Fantastic stuff. So yeah, so I've actually added one book here to the collection, and that, I mean, that's just so beautiful anyway. So the dupe of that will probably go. Then I noticed the complete set of the Pan Lozenge of the Hooded Swan series by Brian Stableford, The Adventures of Star Pilot Granger. And I've got all these. I've had them for years. I read them decades ago. They're my favourite space operas, as I've said many times on the channel. And I think since I mentioned them, I probably first mentioned them a good 2 years ago or more, I have noticed more people are reading them, which is great because they are fantastic and they're very sharp, fleet, short. They have brevity and a caustic sort of character on their side, a symbiotic alien, an interesting starship, and real poetry of the sublime in how the starship is powered. And that's normally not my thing, but Stableford can really pull it off because, of course, he was really good. He understood French literature and decadent writing, and he was able to put those sort of modernist things into the space opera, and that really, really rocks for me. So I bought these because I know some of mine have faded spines. So the idea later on is I take a look at these and compare them to my existing ones and see how they measure up and hopefully get a pristine set out of them. They're out there. You can still get them. You spot them now and again. There's a lot of ones out there which are in a state. These are pretty good. So yeah, and you know, you can't go wrong with that livery. Fantastic artwork as well. Brilliant. And here's the latter three books in the trilogy, The Paradise Game, The Fenris Device and Swan Song. And again, I have thought about doing a top 10 space opera because mine would probably be very different to most of the others, but I'm not really that fussed on space opera. It'll happen at some point, but you can rest assured that all of these would be in there as one piece because they're so good. And it would be great to see a proper reissue of them as an omnibus because I think they rock. I think they stand up to anything else in this subgenre today, you know, and I think people would love them because Granger is such an interesting character and he has the relationship with the symbiote alien which is inside his brain, and it's just great stuff, you know. It really is a lovely entertaining adventure but written intelligently, and that's what you want. So I've got to dedupe those against my existing ones and come up with like a near to pristine set. Then the other set will go on sale, I guess. And we returned to Jack Vance again because they were, again, simply near pristine editions of the late 80s Grafton printings of the Dying Earth sequence. And I have a set of these. I've managed to acquire them all over the last couple of years, you know, without broken spines, without faded spines, and in really beautiful condition. But all four were there, and you see them so irregularly. I just thought, I'm having those. It's that simple, and I'll dedupe them against my existing ones. And here's the fourth one, Rialto the Marvellous, which is really, this is absolutely stunning copy. So nice, and these are all pretty good as well. Look at that, absolutely gorgeous. And I love the typography and the colours, the artwork, and that livery is just so great. I mean, these are such great books. I mean, the most important fantasy novels going. Well, they're science fantasy, they're SF really. You know, my theory on this is that the magic in most science fantasies isn't magic, it's science, it just looks like magic. But yeah, absolutely great. So again, I look at my existing set, I'll put together the best four and I'll sell the others on as a set. Brilliant, brilliant stuff. If you've not read these, you really must. For me, they are probably the highlight of Vance's career by far. There's The Dying Earth, which is a collection of linked novellas, which works like a relay with a baton of stories passed from one character to another. Eyes of the Overworld is the first of the two Kugels novels, and that's really, really quite something, really funny ending. Then its slightly inferior sequel, Kugel Saga, came a lot later. And then the story sequence, Rialto the Marvellous, which people don't think is so great, but I like it. I like all of them. I think they're fantastic. And that jacket art, I do have a 7-house edition like that. It's in a bit of a state and I'd love a mint one, but of course I've got a signed limited anyway, so you know, you just sort of end up buying these books again because they're so beautiful. And of course the beauty of buying the same books again and again is you don't have to read them because you've already read them. It's really quite something. But it is very much about the iconography and the artwork and recapturing that time for me. And I'd rather have multiple copies of great books by authors I love, books I love, than have, you know, loads of stuff which is junk. And I see a lot of book hauls on BookTube, but you know, obviously you don't always know till you've read something. But I see people buying an awful lot of junk just because it looks good, you know, and a lot of it, you know, hasn't lasted and hasn't stayed in print because it wasn't any good. And you know, I'm not saying it has to be good to stay in print. It doesn't. I can name you loads of books which are great, which had one printing and never come back, you know, but sometimes the classic stuff continues to stay in print because it has a certain quality or a certain individuality to it. You know, that's the fact of it. I'm going to finish the haul with a hardcover, and this is Spider by Patrick McGrath, as you can see, and it's Viking. And Patrick McGrath, still active, was the kind of spearhead of the new Gothic, which wasn't really a movement in the late 80s, early 90s. There was a book called the Picador Book of the New Gothic, and it was basically horror stories which are more literary, people like him, Nicholas Royal, what have you, because the real king of the New Gothic was Stephen Gregory, who died recently, and he really sort of started that thing, to my way of thinking, with his book The Cormorant back in 1984, 85, and Spider's really, really good. I mean, I don't have a copy in hardcover. I have read it once a long time ago, and of course this was made into a film by David Cronenberg with Ranulph Fiennes and Miranda Richardson and Gabriel Byrne, and it's about a guy who he spent a lot of time in an institution, and he talks to himself, and he's haunted by memories of when he is young, and he seems to have some sort of learning difficulties, but he's basically having extreme trauma about his childhood. His father was quite an unpleasant man, and it's absolutely fantastic. And that was 10 quid in green ink, which is a great shop. It's one of the newer shops in Hay, but it's the real thing. There's no new books in there. It's all secondhand, really good modern firsts. I love green ink. They deserve a lot more plaudits than they get. And with all the shops which are popping up in Hay, which are doing new books, and the sort of stuff you can get anywhere, what's the point of that? You want to go there, if you're going to go all that way, you want to go there for the collectible stuff. So I'm really pleased with that. So that's a great one to add to the library, because I'm a massive, massive David Cronenberg fan, and I do like McGrath's novels, and this has been a noticeable absence from the collection. So that's a fantastic score for me at £10.